Hello, Cal podcast listeners. I'm Michael O'Connell, past president of the California Association of Healthcare Leaders, an independent chapter for the Northern and Central California region, chartered by the American College of Healthcare Executives. Cal serves healthcare executives in 50 of California's 58 counties, and our vision is to be the premier professional society for healthcare leaders in our region, advancing healthcare excellence and healthcare leadership and improving the lives of the communities we serve. These podcasts are meant to provide thought leadership on numerous healthcare topics from our CAHL members, and today's podcast is on being an authentic leader. Today we welcome Sergio Vincenti, FACHE, who is the service line executive for Medical and Surgical Specialties for the greater Sacramento market of Sutter Health. He's an experienced healthcare leader with a successful record of developing and leading teams in large multi-specialty medical group environments. He's an accomplished leader with experience in health system strategy and operations and is focused on growing people and performance improvement initiatives to achieve results. He's been a member of ACHE since 2008 and works in Sacramento County. Welcome, Sergio.
Having me, Michael.
So, Sergio, let's begin by sharing with our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background. Tell us, how did you get involved in healthcare?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I appreciate the time today. I got involved in healthcare when I was very young. I had fond memories of running up and down the halls of UCSF when my dad, when my mom actually would drop me off after school. And I very distinctly remember while I was waiting for my dad to finish up clinic for the day, just looking at everything and
So
taking it
your so
all
your
in.
dad's a doctor.
Yes, correct. He has been a physician at UCSF in transplant nephrology for 40 plus years now. And from the very beginning, my exposure to healthcare and healthcare delivery started when I was a young child, really witnessing and just seeing him at work and seeing and being exposed to what healthcare really meant. And from just a young age, I was really awed at what I saw and impressed. I didn't understand it certainly as a young child, but I really I took the experience in and thought to myself, how do I be here? How do I do this? It really just took that moment and those years of being exposed to the work that my dad did and patients coming in and patients receiving care and treatment really inspired me to join this profession.
You decided, though, to go the administrative path instead of the clinical path.
I did. And, really that came down to just simply my desire, my passion for the administrative path. I felt like I can better apply my skill set to the administrative path. And I also genuinely enjoy working with a number of multidisciplinary teams to achieve outcomes and to help impact the community. And granted, you can certainly do that as a clinician, and many clinicians do. But I think for me personally, I appreciate the opportunity to really partner with a number of teams, cross-functional teams to help drive outcomes. And for me, the administrative path really spoke to me more.
So your father served as a role model, obviously, for you to consider healthcare and to go down the administrative path. You've had an opportunity to work with a lot of individuals and to be able to see how things are done well and how things aren't necessarily done well. And so what does being an authentic leader mean for you? Because Sergio, it means different things to different people. And what does it mean for you to be an authentic leader?
I define an authentic leader as someone who is transparent and humble, and I think um, communicative. And I think those three pieces are really critical for any leader who seeks to be authentic and who wants to show. When I say wants to show, I mean not putting on um, some other personality or show, truly showing their team vulnerability. And in the past, when I've worked with leaders who can truly demonstrate humility and vulnerability, it builds trust, and trust builds speed of execution. And so in my previous examples or previous leaders who I've seen demonstrate authenticity, these qualities have really helped achieve success, and it have really helped their teams achieve success. And and that is why I try to model those qualities.
So can you share with us an example of a past experience where you had mentioned several qualities that you think are key to be an authentic leader? Uh, can you share with me an example of that how those qualities were demonstrated in an experience that you've had?
There, I had a previous manager who I worked for who I worked in oncology. It is my first role in clinical trials, and I had a particularly challenging clinician who I was working with on a daily basis. And um, I there was a particular incident that happened between myself and this clinician that I had viewed from my perspective as being inappropriate in terms of the language that was used.
Mm-hmm.
And I very specifically remember expressing concern to my manager at the time and really seeking her support for what had happened. And I was grateful at the time because she demonstrated a lot of humble inquiry in that moment, seeking to understand what happened. She um, was very supportive, and she trusted me. And I think those three qualities were really important for me to see in that moment, because I was seeking her support to help with my challenge. And I just remember being a bit nervous and sharing this particular experience with her, not knowing how she would react. And I was so glad when she really demonstrated the qualities of an authentic leader, reassured me that she was going to support me and have a conversation with the physician based on what had happened. And so that was just one of a few examples where I look back and I say, I really appreciated that leadership style in that moment, for many reasons.
I can think when I talk to a lot of individuals, Sergio, about uh, that someone has your back. That that someone said to me once that as the bullets come at you, I'll be behind you 100%. And it's like, no, no, I don't want you to be behind me. I want you to be in front of me. And so
Yeah.
it's that knowing that someone has your back. And then also knowing in healthcare, as you know, um, it's not only what you say and how you say it, but also when you say it as well. And I've learned
Mhm.
that sometimes there's certain individuals that you need someone else to be able to deliver the message because they may not listen to me, but they're going to listen to someone else in a different leadership role. And that's a real art and a science, which I know that you've developed in terms of when you need to deliver the message versus someone else. Can you think of an example where that's occurred, where you had to sort out in being an authentic leader, uh, uh, how to effectively communicate with someone, maybe in a different way?
Yeah, absolutely. One recent example comes to mind is a significant change in the way um, the ambulatory environment was managing referrals for one of our medical groups, and recognizing that this change was going to be very significant to the clinicians. And in the way that the staff were managing the referrals, essentially they were being centralized to one team. There was a lot of discussion with our physician leadership around the support that they can provide to messaging for this particular change and what role they played, because it was widely recognized that foundation or administrative leaders providing this messaging has a lot of risk in it. And in order to really embrace the dyad culture, I worked very heavily, I and many others worked very heavily with our medical group leaders to help support the messaging and provide not just the talking points, but to ensure that frontline clinicians had their questions answered, that the level of anxiety was reduced through, these are all of the things that will be put in place to help address issues as they come up, and always bringing it back to the patient too. And so I think really partnering with our physician leadership on not just how, but like you said, when, and the format of what that messaging is really important. And empowering leaders, other leaders, to feel that they can provide that communication and that we're right there supporting them.
Sergio, you had mentioned dyad partnership, and for our readers that are coming from all walks of life and may not necessarily be familiar with dyad partnership and how that really helps to be an authentic leader, tell us how dyad partnerships work and how it can really help to contribute to individuals being authentic in the work that they do.
Sure. My humble definition of a dyad partnership is a clinical and an administrative leader paired to help support a service, an initiative, a team, anything. Generally, the concept is just one person who's clinically trained and one person who's administrative. I would, to answer your second question, Michael, about how can they partner to help drive effective, authentic leadership. It really comes down to the two leaders bringing different skill sets to the table. Where as an administrative leader may bring the financial, operational, and strategic skill set, the clinical leader will always bring that clinical mindset and how the impact of the change will ultimately impact the patient. And so together, those two different skill sets and backgrounds help drive authentic leadership, because those two skill sets bring two different and complementary leadership styles to the table. And the intent is that by bringing two different leadership styles to the table and backgrounds, you can partner more effectively to help bring an authentic leadership style. So this is it's a great model, and is very effective, at least in my professional experience, for creating authentic leaders and for role modeling authentic leadership behaviors that we want in our organization, and I'm sure many organizations would want.
Sergio, so often in healthcare, there's a lot of changes that are going on, and rapid pace of change. And what role does vulnerability play in authentic leadership within the healthcare that you've experienced?
I'll give a practical example. There was a recent change that impacted staff, and the staff had viewed this change as a reduction in their total PTO that they could take. And so
it became it was very personal for a lot of people.
It was very personal. Exactly. And in thinking from the lens of an authentic leadership mindset, we had several town halls with our staff to help explain the why behind the change, the impact to them, essentially using the CAHL model for any of the listeners who are familiar with that model. But what I learned and what we learned through the process was that humility and really transparency and, as you mentioned, Michael, vulnerability was key. And so I specifically remember many times in that town hall being very transparent and vulnerable with our staff to say, this is what we know today about this change to the PTO. This is what we do not know yet. And just being very frank with them that we don't always have the answers. And this is what we're doing to figure it out. And this is when we expect to have additional clarifying information. So I do think in that being very, I do think that demonstrating vulnerability is critically important because, again, it goes back to that building trust, and it goes back to showing that you're human and you can make mistakes.
One of the things that you mentioned, Sergio, was I'm going to paraphrase that trust, that change occurs at the pace of trust, and that if you don't have the trust, that the change is going to be impeded or not going to advance as quickly as you'd like. Can you share with us a story or an example where you thought it was going to occur much faster and it took time and further development of trust to be able to facilitate that change in terms of being an authentic leader?
Yes, absolutely. There was a couple of years ago, there was a number of clinical departments that were moving from one particular location to the next, and I had made and I look back now as a learning, but I had made the rookie mistake of assuming I had a stronger partnership with the physician leader than maybe they had believed they had with me. And therefore, there was, like I mentioned, a number of moves that were planned for a couple of departments that this physician leader oversaw. And so when we got to 1 week before the potential move, as we brought the physician leader in and really laid out with her, these are the changes that we're planning. This is our go live date. These are all the impacts. Here's who's going to be on site. I had taken her by surprise, and in my mind, I had thought that our partnership and our trust was further along than maybe how she viewed it. She still viewed our relationship as still growing and maturing, and I was farther along on the continuum, maybe in my own mind mistakenly.
Sure.
And that was a learning for me. I learned that at that point there was a lot more change management and communication and relationship building that needed to be had, and than maybe I had accounted for. So going back to how do you weave this into your authentic leadership skill set? It's really, again, going back to build the trust early because it saves so much down the road.
Ronald Reagan had said trust and then verify. And so I've learned the same thing, Sergio, in terms of that you have to continue to reinforce what you think is in place. I had a similar example of a physician move, and the physician said, we got it set, it's all good. And then I thought that this individual had communicated with other physicians, and this individual had not. And so when we're getting ready to move, everyone was so surprised. And like you said, you had mentioned other vehicles to be able to communicate, such as town halls and other things, to be able to make sure let's verify and confirm and have multiple conversations to make sure that everyone's on board. So when you're dealing with how do you ensure that your values align with the healthcare organization you lead? Because there are times when there are decisions that are made that you don't necessarily agree with, and that's going to happen in any organization or any department in terms of some of the decisions that are made. So how do you stay true to yourself and also implement some of the things in an organization, some of the changes that you may not necessarily be comfortable with. And we all deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely. My frame of reference when that happens, and I know that's impacted many, leaders everywhere in any organization, is really I find that I have to remind myself of not just the why behind the change, but really thinking about the impact to the patient and keeping the patient at the center. So while I may not agree with a particular change that is cascaded from senior leadership, I know that my own personal values are to ensure we provide, compassionate, community-oriented care to the patients we serve. And while maybe I don't see alignment with the decision in doing that, I know that if I support that decision, ultimately it will be supporting delivering, high quality community focused care. So for me, it's really just ensuring in my own mind that reminding myself we're doing this for the patient and that's why we're here. And if I'm that patient, what would I want? So for me, it's just bringing it back to keeping the patient at the center. And that helps me ensure I stay aligned with my own values, even if I maybe disagree with the decision.
I found, Sergio, that it's not uncommon in any organization that as much as we want to be patient-centric, sometimes we become staff-centric or provider-centric. A good example is wanting to provide more access to patients, either early in the morning or later at night or on the weekends. And we have staff and providers that are resistant to doing that. And that pace of change, trying to figure out how long will it take us to be able to get to a much broader patient access. Have you experienced anything like that in your professional career, where there's been more staff or provider centric as opposed to patient centric, and how, as an authentic leader, you facilitate that change?
Yes, absolutely. Many years ago, there was a lot of work done within our organization to help incentivize exactly what you mentioned, Michael, where clinicians would be incentivized to work either later hours for access or the weekends. And while initially we had some moderate success with those types of employment arrangements and incentives, what we found was it just was not sustaining. And what we found is that newer physicians coming out of residency really were seeking more of a life, a better balance
Sure.
between work life. And in terms of how we led that change from an authentic leader standpoint, I think we needed to take a step back and recognize our physician workforce is trying to tell us something, which is it is hard to recruit. It is a challenge to overcome a that natural that barrier to have physicians and have clinicians work
Sure.
at 8 or 9 p.m. or on Saturdays or on Sundays. And so I think from my authentic leadership standpoint, I think the learning or the understanding was really we were trying to prioritize our patients and their needs for when they want to seek care, but we defaulted to we are unsuccessful at really supporting our physician workforce and getting them to that place, and recognizing that that won't always be successful despite your best intentions.
Mhm. You had mentioned three qualities that you thought were important for being an authentic leader. Can you tell me what those are again?
Yes, transparency, communication, and vulnerability.
So let's talk about communication. Communication has so many different aspects of when and how and what to say. And I know particularly in working with employees where when information shared, it's that balance of oversharing versus undersharing. And are you holding back, or and them wanting to necessarily hear more than what you're either able to share. How do you balance that? Think of a situation where you had to share something and the staff wanted more information, and maybe you had it, but you couldn't provide it at that time. How do you balance that in terms of your communication and your approach?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in the past, when these types of changes have been made, and the communication piece is really where you're focusing your time. Um, I have found, depending on the situation, in my experience, that the awareness around the change, um, creating that awareness around the change with the staff is important, but recognizing and communicating and setting expectations that not all the information is available maybe at the time that that change is
Sure.
shared is important to communicate. I think at times staff may expect that when a change is communicated from leadership, the the questions will be answered A to Z. And I think as leaders, we have to recognize as a change is being communicated, it is dynamic and new information can become available and may actually impact the original decision. And so as a leader, what I have found is if you communicate that change early with staff, set the expectation that additional information will be forthcoming and we're here to support you through the change. That managing expectations piece is so critical and sometimes helps alleviate that stress and anxiety that's going through our staff members' head. So, over communicate, but back to the messaging of managing expectations really, I think, helps with these particular challenges.
Well, as you mentioned with communication, when you're sharing a change, you may have just learned about it as well. And so as you're sharing it with others, uh, what I'm hearing is you have the vulnerability to be able to say, that's a good question. I don't know. And let me
Mhm.
follow up and get back in touch with you in the group to be able to let them know what that is. So it's that vulnerability to be able to say, we don't all have all the answers. And it really takes a team approach to be able to address it. And that's why you're having the town halls or some of the things that you do.
Mhm. Yeah, and it just creates an environment again of trust to show that you don't have all the answers, but you appreciate that these are great questions that are coming forward. And how
Mhm.
do you support the staff with getting the information to help address their questions? And I think that the you can actually garner the support for the change because then they they trust that you have their back and you're asking these questions on their behalf.
Right. One of the things, Sergio, that so often we as leaders, we may have 1, 2, 3, 4 months to be able to know about this change that's percolating, and we've had a chance to be able to work through it, and then we present it to our teams, and we're surprised that they're responding the way they are. We've had 3 or 4 months to be able to figure it out, and then we're so surprised that we've given them 1 hour to be able to figure it out, and just recognizing that the change does take time for people to be able to think through it and to be able to figure out how will it impact me, and then how can I move forward to be able to support the change. So
Yeah,
let's
and
talk
that's
about your teams. You've had you've been part of a team as well as you've managed teams, and how do you support not only you being an authentic leader, how do you support your team and for them to be authentic in the work that they do as well? What are some of the strategies or efforts or things you've done in the past to
mhm.
develop your teams to be as authentic as you are, if not better?
Well, I take a maybe a different approach, either right or wrong, and typically at one-on-ones with my team, while while we do focus a portion of our time on problem solving and ensuring that they help remove barriers that they escalate to me, I always reserve time at the end to say, how do I help support you in your growth? And how do we ensure that their professional development is always part of the conversation at our one-on-ones? And of, are they planning to attend one of a leadership development course offered through Sutter? Are we going to think, would they make a good fit for leading a particular initiative that's rolling out that has visibility with leadership? Is there something else that we should be thinking or planning about? So from an authentic leader standpoint, my purpose or my really intent is to help grow and support the leadership development of my team, much like I would like for myself. And being that authentic leader, I'd like to give that opportunity to my team to say, where are your goals and where would you like to go from a career
Mm-hmm.
development and growth perspective? And how do I support that? And not just having that conversation at performance reviews once a year, but building it in, to periodic one-on-ones so that it is an ongoing conversation and it's a part of our focus.
Mm-hmm. And then how does that work in terms of you being part of teams as well? Is that something that you've learned from others throughout your career, or is that something that you've built for yourself?
I think a little bit of both. I've had for the past who used a similar style. I found it really effective, and I appreciated that growth and development discussions are incorporated regularly as part of one-on-ones. And so I had tried it with a different group of direct reports a couple of years ago that I supported, and had gotten some really positive feedback from leaders who reported to me saying, wow, it is really refreshing to have ongoing conversations regarding growth and not necessarily just wait until a one-year conversation at a performance review. So since that time, I've found that even my current team has stated they do really appreciate having that ongoing conversation, because then you don't lose sight of it and
Mm-hmm.
you can bring additional focus to it, and it provides value, I think, for both me as a leader, but certainly for my team as well, because it puts their growth as my priority.
I'm sure it also, as organizations evaluate employee engagement, that you find that there's higher employee engagement through those strategies as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Sergio, do you want to, before we finish the podcast, are there any additional insights or perspectives or wrap up that you want to provide to our listeners before we finish up?
I'll just close on saying probably the most valuable leadership lesson that I had learned in the past year really is that, and I learned it from a senior leader, is really around that trust does build speed. And so in a time where our industry is moving so quickly and there continues to be even more change, speed is essential, and trust enables speed. And so, and to get to trust, that foundational relationship building is so key. So I have found in my kind of leadership journey that I invest the time to build the relationships, and then I see that the relationships and the trust then develop the outcomes that you are striving for. So I would just encourage, or maybe offer to our podcast listeners, that I'm sure we've all heard what the book Start with the Why. For me, it's kind of start with the trust, if you will, and that it's going to enable so many other things.
Great insights and perspectives. So this concludes CAHL's podcast for today. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and we do have plans to continue providing thought-provoking insight from healthcare leaders throughout CAHL's geography. We hope you learn something new every day, that you make a difference and are kind. Good day.